Welcome to Life Change Solutions, a podcast for hope, health, and happiness. I'm your host, Kendra Crompton, and today I have a very special guest with me. His name is Bob Cherry, and he's in my book. So if you have not picked up a copy of my book and you want to hear his story, you can, but you're going to hear it more in detail today. And I'm going to give you a little, I'm actually going to read from the book a little bit about his story. Now, I didn't get everything quite right, and I wrote the book a little bit ago, so some of the time frames are going to be a little bit different. But Bob and I have been working for about 5 years. I've been his trainer, and throughout that time, he has been a wealth of knowledge and has given me so much wisdom, and there's insights that he has. I just felt like we needed to have you as our listeners hear him, and especially in relationship to his hope and health and happiness, and his relationship with his wife and family, because it was clear to me as I interviewed him for the book that that is what has gotten him through so many challenges. So I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to introduce you to Bob. So from my book, this is what I wrote. Bob found hope in his relationships and work. When Bob first saw Phyllis, he knew immediately she was the girl he was going to marry. Once married, they raised 2 beautiful daughters and owned a thriving dental practice. This was until the day their youngest daughter was diagnosed with synovial sarcoma, a rare form of fatal cancer, and their life was turned upside down. They closed their practice and moved from Pennsylvania to Florida for their daughter. Her death was devastating for Phyllis, so much so that she could barely function. Bob knew that this could take a toll on their marriage and could not bear the thought of losing his wife. To quote him, he said, "Phyllis meant more to me than anything, and I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her." Bob decided that if he had to give 100% and Phyllis could give nothing for the rest of their lives, he would do that. Additionally, he set up a new dental practice, which gave him another source of fulfillment and purpose in his life. He enjoyed his work and spent time with Phyllis until one day he was diagnosed with lupus nephritis, a kidney disease which destroys the kidneys. Eventually, he had to have a transplant from his only living daughter. Now the tables were turned, and Phyllis had to give 100%. With her constant love and care, Bob recovered, and they are both healthy, exercising daily, eating well, and have been happily married for now 55 years, and their hope lies in their love for each other and their daughter and their grandchildren. So, Bob, to begin with, I would like to ask you a little bit about that first portion where you met Phyllis and how you met, and then how did you know she was the one? Because I get a lot of that from couples and young people. Like, how do you know if it's the one? How did you know?
How did I know?
Well, first, how did you meet?
I felt differently than I felt with anybody else. I don't think it was a logical thing. I think it really was just a feeling. Well, I mean, I just felt that we were just meant for each other. And apparently, I guess she felt the same way.
Yeah. Well, at first, tell me about the first meeting, because you were telling me that she wasn't quite so sure when she first met you. So how did you first meet each other?
Well, what happened was a friend of mine was going to law school at NYU in New York. I was going to dental school at Temple University in Pennsylvania. And he had a friend who was friendly with a girl named Phyllis Cherry. And he said, she said to him, "You know, you have a friend, Bob Cherry. Wouldn't that be funny if those two went out on a date?" And so so I was given Phyllis's name by my friend, and I called her. But at the time I called her, she was going with another guy. She was going with somebody from the University of Pittsburgh. So I kept calling, every couple of weeks for the summer, and finally she agreed to meet me. And when we went out, I guess she felt the same way as I did, because we were inseparable from that time till now.
Oh, wow. What I think is very interesting about this is that, and maybe for our young listeners who are wondering, hey, well, that person has a boyfriend, that one person has a girlfriend. Hey, don't give up. Don't give up on that. Look at, he was persevered and still, and she decided that he was the one for her, even though she was dating somebody else. So that may be your fate as well. If you know it's the right person, don't give up. So the interesting thing is, her name was Phyllis Cherry. Yours is Bob Cherry. She didn't have to change her name, so that made it easy too.
Yeah, well, that's a funny story, because when our first daughter was born, the nurse came in and said to Phyllis, "What's her maiden name?" And she said, "Cherry." And the nurse said, "No, dear, I'm not talking about your married name. I want your maiden name." So Phyllis said, "My maiden name was Cherry." She says, "No, dear, you don't understand. I don't want your married name. I want your maiden name." And she finally had to insist that her maiden name was the same as her married name.
Well, that is very interesting. I would be interested in learning about your genealogy to see how far back maybe you guys do connect. But the interesting thing is, through all of that, is you did get together. You ended up having 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And we're living quite nicely up in Pennsylvania. You had a dental practice there, an established dental practice.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I wrote in my book, things turned upside down for you.
Yeah, well, I started out by myself in my practice for 10 years. Then we moved the practice to a larger building. I took in a partner, and I was there 20 years. And then my daughter, they had both finished high school, and they were in Florida, living in Florida. My youngest daughter was going for accounting. She became an accountant, and my oldest daughter was a lawyer. It still is. But what happened was, my youngest daughter went to the doctor, and they misdiagnosed a growth on her abdomen, and they excised it, I think, without biopsying it, which was obviously not a good thing. And then when the biopsy came, when they finally did, then we brought her back home to Philadelphia, and we took her to our gynecologist, and he biopsied it, and he told us, that's when we found out it was actually cancer. They thought they were removing called a Bartholin's gland in Miami, but it wasn't. So she stayed in Philadelphia for a little while she underwent radiation. I think she was here for about 3 months, and then she went back to Florida. She went back to work. There was some degree of remission, but then they decided that they would have to operate, and they in 2 separate operations about 3 months apart. They took out one lung, and they tried to scrape all the tumors off of it, and then they put that back, and then after that healed, they did the other lung as well. And throughout it all, which was about a 2-year period, I mean, she was a real trooper. She went to work when she could, and she just hung in there really strong. I admire her for her strength and her courage. And eventually her liver failed. Once her liver failed, there was really not much anybody can do.
That must have been so difficult for you and your wife, especially then moving your practice down or moving down to help her and then starting a practice here in Florida.
I don't think any of us thought about difficulty. I don't even think difficulty entered into our mind. It was just we had to do what we had to do, and we just did it the best we could. We were there for her as much as we could. We moved the house and the practice from Pennsylvania to Florida in about 7 months. I took the Florida boards and passed them, and it was just an all-out effort.
Yeah.
We did everything. We did everything we could for as long as we could, and it was devastating. It really was. You never think that you're going to outlive your children.
That is one of the hardest things that I've seen in my with counseling. People go through. How do you deal with that? You expect to see your children, grow and get married and do all those things that you look forward to. And I know that you have mentioned to me how devastating that was for Phyllis and your dedication to that marriage, because that is one of the, one of the biggest things that that marriages don't get through. So many times a marriage, because it cannot withstand that, there's just too much memories. So what made the difference for you and Phyllis?
Well, I had read that one of the largest factors in the breakup of marriages was loss of a child.
It's true.
And I had made up my mind that no matter what I did, I was not going to have that happen. So everybody, I don't know where the concept came from, but everybody thinks marriage is 50-50. And marriage is never 50-50. Marriage can be 10-90, it can be 20-80, and it can go back and forth side to side. Life is not fair. I used to tell the kids whenever they would complain to me about something that happened, I used to tell them LINF, which was our abbreviation for life is not fair. And to this day, they understand that things are going to happen and it's not going to be fair. It's just going to be. And I think once you understand that, it's easy to accept the concept that marriage is never 50-50. So there'll be times that you have to give tremendously, and there'll be times that your partner has to give tremendously, and then other times it may be fairly even.
So it was quite some time that you were giving 100%. I think you had mentioned to me how many years? About 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want her to have a nervous breakdown, and I wanted the marriage to survive. So I did what I felt was necessary to make sure that we got through this together.
And that was a total of about 5 years?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Each year, remember, each year is better. It wasn't devastating for 5 years. Each year got a little bit better. But until I could recognize her again as the person I knew before Lisa died, it was probably about 5 years.
I admire your dedication to and commitment to that marriage. I don't see that a lot. In fact, I more than not see that commitment is not there. In fact, when we look at statistics, they have recently changed to the number one reason for divorce is commitment. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that, because I feel like that in today's age, that's a real thing, the commitment. What do you think is different between your generation or your marriage and today's world?
I'd have to say the biggest difference that I've seen is that people want everything in life today to be easy. And I just don't see how life can be easy all the time. You don't grow. You don't grow without challenge, without change, without hardship. If everything went your way, you'd be the same person you were when you were 6 years old. You need change. You need challenge, and even I hate to say it, tragedy to make you understand what life is really about. And it's not what you see on television, let me tell you.
We've had this discussion quite a bit about what life is all about, what life is really about. And I think that you are very right about people today want things to be easy, and marriage is never easy. Marriage, there's going to be work. You have two different, and the challenges. And, studies do show that those difficulties that we have are necessary for our happiness. That if we didn't have those hard times, we wouldn't recognize the happy times. So the studies all show we need that in our lives, just like you said. So that's another wisdom of Bob Cherry, is you got to have those hard times in order to find that happiness.
Well, not everybody has to have them, but I think you need certain stresses in order to grow.
Yes,
and
that's true.
There are people that never even understood that they had them. That never grow. They're the same person. They always was. I'll meet somebody that I knew when I was younger, and they are exactly the same as they were then. So I don't know that they've really changed very much, but whether that's healthy or not, I guess it depends on the individual and their circumstances.
I think you're right. Because we do, in my mind, as we get through this life, we do change to be better, to be that better person. But maybe those people never needed. They were better as they were. But for me, the challenges that I've been through have helped me become better. I think, to fulfill more of who I am meant to be, to do the things I need to do, to be there for the people that I need to be there for. And I think the same is for you, because then we've seen that with your daughter and with your wife. You were there for your wife, but you're also there for your other daughter, who, interesting enough, was there for you during that kidney transplant. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that in itself is an amazing story.
Yeah, definitely. My kidneys were failing, and my nephrologist said, "You know what? I had a kidney biopsy about 10 years ago." He said, "I think it's time for another kidney biopsy. Let's see what the kidneys are doing now." So I went into the hospital for kidney biopsy, and this time, when the doctor did it, I felt a really sharp pain, which I hadn't felt at all the first time. And I told him, and he said, "Well, that's nothing to worry about." So they put me in recovery, and apparently what happened, unbeknownst to me, is that he punctured a major vessel in the kidney, and I was bleeding internally, and my bladder completely filled up with blood, and it clotted. So there was no way I was going to be able to urinate, and I was literally screaming in pain in the recovery room. And finally, they came in. They gave me a shot to put me out, and they called my urologist, who left this practice, came to the hospital, and tried to clean out the clots in my bladder. They got about half of them out, and they said, they did enough for today. They're going to come back and try it again tomorrow. So the next day they did it. Fortunately for me, I don't remember any of that. I think I was pretty much out of it. But I remember 3 or 4 days later, where I was laying there in a bed, and they told me what had happened. So because of all this and all the trauma to the kidney and everything, I definitely needed dialysis. So they put me on dialysis in the hospital, and I was on dialysis, I think, for about 6 months or so. And my daughter was fighting with me. She wanted me to take the kidney. I said, I can't do it. And she fought with me and fought with me. And finally I said, well, if that's what you want, I guess I'll do that. And I mean, I really do appreciate that what she did for me. It was actually, she just gave me life. But I'm
going to stop you there for a minute because I love this. You gave her life and then she gave you your life back. But I can imagine, having already lost your other daughter, what was going through your mind that this is my only daughter left. What if something should happen? I don't want to do that. I mean, that would be going through my mind.
I wasn't very happy about it, but she made the appointments. She did everything. She got herself tested. She made the appointment. She did everything. And then she told me, this is what you're doing.
Sounds like she takes after Phyllis.
Yeah. She does. And so, that was that. And it took me a while to recover, like you said. And about a year after the operation, I was at least strong enough to start training again.
And this was not your idea. It was Phyllis's. Phyllis said, hey, she came to me and she said, will you train Bob? I want to know on your end, because I've never heard this story, what you were thinking. Who is this person coming in to train me? Or was there some resistance?
I had a trainer that worked with me at the club. And I said, why can't I go back? She said, and of course, Kendra, you're going to love this. She said, Kendra's the best. You have to go with her. She really knows what she's doing. You can stop blushing now. And
thank you, Phyllis.
And she said, no, you really have to do this. So I said, okay. And I did, and I'm really happy that I did. But it took a while, you know that. And
and I admire you for your dedication, because no matter what, you showed up twice a week, every weekend. You have been for the last 5 years, showing up twice a week, working out. In fact, I have a picture. I'm going to post it when we post this, of you doing a plank. He is 81 years old and can hold a plank for almost a minute. How many 81-year-olds do you know can do that? I don't know many, but he has really dedicated himself to his health. And part of my podcast is about health and how we maintain our health, and even through hard times. And this was definitely a challenging time. So I know you don't like it when Phyllis nags you and says, drink more water, and she makes you eat healthy and you can't have pumpkin ice cream all the time. But it has paid off, because here you are at 81 and you're doing planks, you're doing the step, you are lifting weights, and you're in really, really good shape for your age. You're amazing. Old is relative.
My nephrologist at Miami told me that I'm the poster boy of the transplant patients.
There you go. Well, we'll put that on there as a title, poster boy for transplants.
Yeah. No, my numbers are all good. My numbers, thank God, are right where they should be.
Well, I think a lot is due to that relationship you have with Phyllis, and that you do listen to her, that you have that, that relationship where you respect her and admire her. And when I talk to couples about relationships, we talk about what is the most important: love, respect, admiration. And what we find in research is that respect and admiration is essential to longevity in a relationship. You have to have that respect and admiration, at least some. And then the other is core values. Do you have the same values? And I think that just your backgrounds, coming from the same religious background, coming from the same where you came from, that helps also for longevity of a relationship. What other things do you think helped you all, both you and Phyllis, with your relationship? Because that is a long time to be married, 55 years.
Yeah, you know what? I've thought about that a lot. In the beginning, I guess with most young people, there's a lot more passion than logic, and anything else involved. But as you get older, you begin to know and understand what makes each other tick, and you have to know the other person's feelings, and you do after a while learn how the other person thinks. So I can tell you how she's thinking. I'm sure she could tell you how I'm thinking. And you want to tread lightly on each other's feelings. So as you learn, you go from two people into one person. Even though you are two physical people, you think the same. You still act like you were as an individual, but you understand that the other person is influencing you and you're influencing them.
I love that about you are one, but yet you're individual. Because that is, I think, the goal of marriage, that you can be unified as one, but that you still maintain your individuality. And sometimes people give up their individuality, and that doesn't work. But I know she's very headstrong, and you are, and yet you still understand. And I love that you also said tread lightly with people's feelings. What a beautiful concept. Tread lightly with their feelings.
Yeah, you have to understand at least a little bit about human nature before you can deal with other people. It's not just marriage, but I mean people in general. The thing that really has helped me the most, especially in my later years, is when somebody says something or does something, it's easy to react to the act, and it's easy to get emotional about what they have said. And sometimes they say things to hurt you, to disappoint you, to whatever their reasons. But if you look at the underlying cause of why they said what they did, it really diffuses the situation tremendously. It's like night and day. It's just words, and I really like to look into the reason as to why they did what they did, or the reason they said what they said. When I understand that, it's almost impossible to be mad. Really,
I love this. I love this this conversation, because so often someone will say something and we take it so personally. I just had a friend who I talked with about that. She was so upset about something someone said, and I was able to help her see this wasn't about her. It was about the other person and what she was going through. And sometimes we just need to, and I call this practice the pause. Pause before you react. And then you can be proactive in how you deal with that situation. So that's great advice. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Most personal attacks are not really even personal attacks. There's somebody venting something that happened to them, and they just don't know any other way to vent it, and they'll attack, and that's not really what they meant to do to begin with.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think too, there's a great book called The Four Agreements, and one of them is don't take things personally. So I really think that's, and it's hard not to do. It's very hard not to do. Because we do sometimes feel attacked. One of the things that you've brought up with me in our conversations is you read a book years ago that has influenced you forever. And the book was by Leo Buscaglia. Do you remember that?
And not only do I remember that, that's my granddaughter's favorite book. I gave it to her years ago. And she read it and she really liked it. Yeah, I do remember.
Now, what's the name of that book?
Pardon me?
What was the name of that book?
It's Love by Leo Buscaglia.
Yeah, I think it's love. What's the purpose of life? Something like that. That's the purpose of life.
I don't remember it being anything but love, but maybe.
Yeah, something like that. It's a great book. It's applicable today as it was then.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, his story. But I think by reading that book, it gave you a better understanding too of what love is really about. And I think there is a misconception today on what love is really about. And I'm just so impressed that no matter what, you carry that, that feeling of love, even when people maybe say things, even when Phyllis is nagging you, you still have that love for her. You don't take it personally at all. And I think that's one of the things that has helped your marriage.
Well, and also the thing I liked about that book was he talks about the child within you. Everybody has a child within them. They have memory of themselves as a 4 or 5 year old. And it's a pure, innocent image. And that's why little kids are so cute, because they haven't been influenced by any outside factors. And he said, if you can maintain the child within you for your entire life, he said, it will insulate you against everything else around you, everything that's going on, everything that's happening to you. If you just cling to that little loving child inside of you, that is really who you are. And I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that children love so purely. They forgive so easily. Because
what changed?
Yeah, what changes is our environment and life, I think. We start to have experiences that make us feel bad and we don't know how to handle them. And so I think growing, like you talked about in the beginning, is having changes that we grow and we learn and we become again to feel that pure love. And I am all about, how do we have that love? And I think a lot is what you said, is to really kind of be introspective about yourself and then about other people, and not always be on the attack. And I think through the pandemic, people are always on the attack. We see it politically. We see it, with religious sects. We see it with so many things that people are just always on the attack. And I think having worn masks, people could say things that they didn't, think was going to matter because people couldn't see your faces. And now I think we need to come back into this pure love of understanding and not reacting and being a little proactive instead of having angst and anger, which there is so much of in this world. And you're a breath of fresh air of love and positivity. And you instruct me and help me to see things that I didn't see before. So I'm really thankful that you decided to come on my podcast via, this is my first podcast where we've had to do it separately because of your immune system being compromised. And I really appreciate you making the effort to do that, to be here. And this is a growing experience for me because I've not done a podcast like this before. So I'm so appreciative that you were able to do that for us and also share with us some of the wisdom that you've had through the years. I think also in this day and age, we don't look to those who have had more wisdom. So I appreciate that you're sharing that with us. Is there anything else that you want to add in relation to hope, health, and happiness?
Okay. I don't even know how to define hope, to be honest with you, because I think it's different for different people.
It is. And what I wrote, and that's exactly what I wrote in my book, is that for some people, they find it through God. For other people, they find it through relationships. I used you as an example of those relationships giving you hope, in that you wanted to be there for Phyllis. You wanted to be there for your grandchildren. These are things you've expressed to me, and be able to see them grow, to be there for them, to have family gatherings. And I think that's where your hope stems from what I could, just my interaction with you. And so I did put that in my book, that sometimes hope comes from those relationships that we have.
Now, as far as health goes, again, I think that's really closely tied to self-image, because if you don't feel good about yourself, you're not gonna want to take care of yourself. It's like the difference between a new car and an old car. A new car, you want to keep it clean. You want to polish it. You want to vacuum it. You just want to make it spotless. The car gets old. Well, you don't get it gets a dent here and there. You don't get it fixed. You know what I mean? And you can compare that to health, because if you feel good about yourself, you're going to want a new car. If you don't, you're going to want a junker. And that's what you're going to get.
So you're telling me that you feel really good about yourself because you are doing great at working out.
Well, I listen, I hope for the best. I always do. And I do what I can to stay healthy and, and just keep things going the way they are.
Okay. The last one is happiness. And I do want to bring up one thing with happiness that's brought you happiness in recent years, because you did have to give up your practice after the kidney transplant. From one day to the next, you had to leave your practice, which that was difficult because that was really your purpose. You loved dentistry. You loved being there.
I did it for 50 years. And every day I learned something new. It really is a profession, a medical dental profession is a learning experience. You get out of school and you just begin. You learn every day better in different ways to do things, better in different ways to interact with people. And it's extremely gratifying. I mean, it really is. And I had to give it a bang, 1, 2, 3, coming out of the hospital, a mess. So what I did, I started little projects. I started working with my hands, and I went into a thing called steampunk, where you make objects out of junk, basically gears and things like that. And as I got into that, I realized I'd like to do something that's a little more artistic. So then I worked with wood. During the pandemic, I worked a lot with wood, specifically driftwood, and I made some pieces. I've made political pieces. I've made frivolous pieces, and I've made what I call artistic pieces. Some of the artistic pieces are really just pretty much art, not symbolism as in my political pieces. And I've worked now with wood, metal, glass, and mostly epoxy in recent months.
Well, and what I love about this is someone who has gone through what you have can easily just sit and watch TV and do nothing more. Barely get off the couch. I've seen this happen. So I'm telling you from experience that with clients, they just sit and do that. But you didn't. He has a little workshop in his garage, right? And in fact, do you have a piece there that you can show us?
Yeah, I had this. I had some. Every time I do a project, I have a little spare epoxy left, and I bought these little molds where you can make jewelry. This is. See if I can show you.
Oh, and I have mine. So he has one of. This is mine. If you can all see it, I don't know if you can see it, but they're really, really awesome.
Yeah, they're little.
And that's just from your leftover artwork.
Yeah, it's leftover epoxy. We made these little necklaces.
Okay, so what I'd really love to see, if you have it handy, the piece that you made for Phyllis.
I made a lot of pieces for Phyllis. Which one do you want?
It was the love one. Do you have that one?
Okay. All right. Hold on. I'll get it.
Okay. So he makes these pieces and they're very meaningful. And the thing that I love about this is that he's found a way to find joy in doing something, even though he lost that dentistry, and he found a passion. and a purpose. And so he's made these artworks, and they all have meaning, and he has little descriptions of what they mean. And this one is love. I love it. And you see the cherries but Cherry, the last name. So that's one of his pieces. He has so many more. And like he said, some political ones that have brought him, I think, brings you happiness, because every time you show me a new piece, I can see your eyes light up and you describe it. And it's just something you've accomplished. It gives you some sense of fulfillment. Am I correct in that?
There are many definitions of happiness. The one I kind of like the best is being in the process of achieving goals. If you're in the process, no matter who you are or what the goals are, if you're in the process of achieving goals, you can be happy. Once you achieve those goals, it's time to move on, because having the things that you worked for is not enough. You need to go on to another level and find things that you want to do. They don't have to be material things, but you have to keep your mind busy.
Well,
and that's not watching television, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I write about in my book. Happiness does not come from getting everything you want, not achieving the goals. It comes from the process. It's the process and doing it. And the people that are the most happy are those that are in the process of doing it. Because once you get that goal, then you seek for something else. So happiness comes through the seeking. Or from the doing, like you are now doing your artwork and keeping up with your fitness and working with Phyllis on that relationship continually. And,
it's an ongoing.
It is ongoing. Even after 55 years, it's an ongoing process, and it brings you happiness. I see you two together, and yes, I see her nagging you to drink more water and do more work, but it's I think you have told me, I know that she loves me, because she was telling me to do this. If she didn't love me, she wouldn't care. And so,
she didn't love me.
Pardon?
I said she wouldn't be here. She'd be gone.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I want to thank all of my viewers today and the listeners for listening to my podcast. I hope this podcast has been inspiring and uplifting, as Bob is always to me. Again, my focus is to lift spirits and lighten loads. And I hope that Bob has done that. And this podcast, this show has done that for you today. I'd like to also thank all of my listeners for their comments and questions, and for the reviews. I appreciate so much the reviews that you've given me and the questions, and it's helped me to reflect and to also find answers to some of your questions. So again, thank you. And please continue to listen and to share. And if you have a question that you'd like answered, or you have a challenge that you're going through, please email me or contact me through this podcast, or go to my website and also my Facebook page. You can also, like I said, all of this information will be on my notes. So look it up. And if you can and would like to, please purchase this book, Bob's Stories in It. Many other inspiring stories are in this book. So I would highly encourage you to go to Amazon. And in the month of January, it will be discounted so that people can have that as they start their New Year's resolutions and want to make changes in their life. So look on Amazon for Life Change Solutions. And thank you again for listening to this podcast.